Hey everybody, Gormos here with some more gameplay from the Ground Forces closed beta, and this time we take a look at the simulator battle mode as it is currently in game. Simulator battles was available a few times by now, but I only recently got the chance to try it myself, and I would like to give you a bit of an impression and a bit of feedback on the current version. Now, it of course has to be said that this is a very early version of simulator battles, and certainly subject to change, and a lot of things are not implemented in their final version yet. Still, I had a few fun games in this mode, and I think it has a lot of potential. Let's take a look at the differences to realistic battles in the current version. There are at the moment not that many differences, but the ones that are here have quite an impact. The first difference you can see is the camera angle. In simulator battle mode we currently have the camera that is fixed more or less above the commander's head and simulates the view the commander would have if he would be turned out. That of course limits your field of view, and you can't look around corners or over hills without exposing your tanks the way you can in a third-person camera. That really adds a realistic atmosphere and feels very immersive in my opinion. Now, of course, so far your commander is not actually turned out, it's just a camera perspective. But I hope turning in and out for the commander will be added in the future. As I have said in my last video, some people argue that you have to create interiors for the tanks first before this would be possible. But I don't think that is necessary, though it would of course be nice to have fully modeled interiors eventually. But for turning in and out of the tank, I think it would be sufficient to have a commander's periscope or vision slits of the cupola when turned in. Now, another small difference I have noticed is that you can't zoom in the commander's view, only in the gunner's view. I don't know if that is intentional or not though. In simulator battles for aircraft you can zoom a bit of course, and I think the small zoom you get usually when you press the right mouse button or whatever you have bound it to is not unrealistic. In reality you would be able to see more than on a computer screen with limited resolution. A little zoom helps to counter that, and that's why most simulations let you zoom your view a bit if necessary. What I would also really like to see in addition to that would be binoculars for the commander. That would be really helpful to take a closer look at possible targets further away. Of course, you can use the gunner sight for that, but the gunner scope is more restrictive and of course fixed to the gun, so you have to bring the entire turret around to use it. It would be nice to have binoculars to quickly check your surroundings without having to bring the entire turret around. But I expect to see something like that eventually. Currently it's not such a big deal, because we still play on arcade maps of course, and the ranges are usually pretty low, but Gaijin already said that they are working on bigger maps for realistic battles and simulator battles, and then the distances are most likely big enough to make binoculars a very useful tool. Also, since this is simulator battle mode, you don't get the large kill messages you get in the other modes. This is the same for the aircraft part of course, but since I'm still somewhat new to simulator battles, I did occasionally miss a kill message. That's why you sometimes see me fire another round into an already destroyed tank. Now, let's take a look at the spotting system as it is currently in simulator battles. The good news is the name tags for the enemy tanks are gone in this mode. That is great, and I hope this will happen in realistic battles as well eventually. So you have to put some effort into spotting targets again, and you have to think about things like that firing your gun might give your position away. And of course, if a target is hidden behind a tree or a bush and you can't see it, you can't fire on it, and you need to change your position until you can see the target. That means combat in this mode is a lot more interesting and exciting in my opinion. You are always looking around wondering if you might have missed something, and your choice of camouflage actually matters. I can't wait to get more options here for my Panzer IV F2, as I think the standard grey is somewhat suboptimal, but it is cool that it matters at all. Now, there's something I have to criticize as well. The minimap spotting is still here. If the game decides your commander can see a target, it is marked on the minimap and also relayed to your team members. And your commander has a very good vision by the looks of it. This leads to enemy tanks being on the minimap most of the time, and you usually have a very good idea of what the enemy team is doing. But again, simulator mode is still in a very early state, and I can only imagine that the devs simply did not have the time yet to changing this in simulator battle mode. The way I personally would like to solve this is that you can order your radio operator to report the position of an enemy tank you can see and you look at it. And then you have the position marked on the map. However, not a moving marker, but a fixed one, maybe with a timestamp so that it is clear how old this spot is. So that if an enemy tank moves away and you don't update his position, the mark is not correct anymore. It has to be said though that the current minimap spots are not 100% accurate either. Well, for long range they are pretty accurate, but at close range it can be misleading, something you have to keep in mind. Overall, I would say about simulator battle mode, even though it is clearly in a very early state, it is fun, and I could imagine that this will become my main game mode for ground forces in the future. If you have access to the closed beta, I can only recommend giving it a try. More people to test are always welcome, though there already seem to be quite a few players in SB. Now, manual transmission control is not enforced in simulator battle mode as of yet, though that might change in the future, and I personally think that might be a good idea if it is. It's simulator mode after all, and manual transmission control is not difficult to use. Some use it even in arcade. And in simulator battles I really like to have the ability to slowly advance using a lower gear. It's a useful option to have. I can only recommend it, and it adds a lot of immersion if you use the manual transmission. Now let's talk a bit about the damage model. As far as I can tell, the damage model in simulator battles and realistic battles is the same, so I talk about SB and RB here. Now, there were a few updates to the damage model since my last video, and I would say it is much improved and much more realistic again. One-shots are more common again, though there are a few tanks that seem to be able to take a bit more damage than you would expect. In general, I still think that the effect of hits into the fighting compartment could be a bit more severe. But I guess a part of that problem here is that there are a few elements of the damage model that are not in the game yet. I think specifically about the crew replacement system that was mentioned in the first dev diary about the ground forces damage model. In that, it states that in the future it is planned that it will take some time till the crew takes over the function of a knocked out crew member. This particular feature is not in the game yet, so if you knock out a gunner for example, the tank is less accurate and the turret a little slower, but it can still aim and fire back right away. I think especially in the two realistic modes, realistic battle and simulator battle, this can lead to frustrating situations sometimes. For example, as it happened to me a few times today, you flank a KV-1 and fire a shot into the side of its turret, you penetrate and knock out its gunner, its loader and the commander. And then the KV-1 just swings its turrets around and fires back. And I have to say, you feel kind of cheated in such a situation. You got the flank, you penetrated your shot, you knocked out the entire turret crew. The tank should not be able to fire back right away. And I think once the crew replacement system is in the game, the tank would not be able to fire back right away in such a situation, because knocking out the crew member actually means that he is out of action for a while and he can't do its job, like rotating the turret or firing the gun. That would solve such a situation. The tank might not be destroyed yet, but at least he could not fire back until his crew is back in action, and that would just add a bit of weight to the damage you do when penetrating the crew compartment with an anti-tank round, and I think that is needed in a realistic game mode. So I am really looking forward to this particular system being introduced, because other than knocked out crew members not having quite the effect that I would expect, I'm mostly happy with the damage model as it is now. There is only one other thing that bothers me a bit at the moment, and that thing is the effect of high explosive ammo, especially the high explosive rounds from high caliber guns like the SU-122 has, which, unlike anti-tank rounds, are pretty much guaranteed to kill everything they hit in one shot. That leads to the somewhat weird situation where this assault gun, the SU-122, that was specifically designed to be used against fortifications and soft targets, not tanks at all, is currently the best tank killer in the game. even better than the KV-2 because it reloads faster. Again, I don't know if that is intentional or not, but I think a lot of people overestimate how useful high explosive, even from large caliber guns like the 122mm howitzer, was against tanks. Now, I know there are a few somewhat unreliable sources like Wikipedia that claim such a high explosive round could knock the turret off a tank, but I find it somewhat unlikely that that happened very often. Maybe if the round hit exactly the turret ring and exploded between the turret and the hull, this could happen, and there was certainly some spalling or injuring of the crew because of the shockwave, but a reliable one-shot kill every time, no matter where you hit, certainly not. Otherwise there would not have been a point to develop the Su-122 into the Su-85 for tank killing. And the shrapnel from such a high explosive round is not enough to pierce the armor of a tank either. Without the barrel, the explosives won't accelerate the shrapnel enough to penetrate the armor plate like you have it on a tank. After all, it is just a fragment of a shell, much lighter and smaller than the entire shell, and would need to be a lot faster to get anywhere near the same kinetic energy than an anti-tank round, and on top of that the shrapnel does not have the proper shape for armor piercing. And there are enough sources that document the ineffectiveness of normal high explosive rounds versus tanks. One example comes to mind: in the early stages of the Korean War, before the US forces got reinforcements and their own tanks and proper anti-tank weapons, they had to employ weapons like howitzers and artillery in direct fire mode, or recoilless guns, all firing high explosives, against Korean T-34-85 tanks. This had reportedly very little effect, and that's not a surprise. There's a reason anti-tank weapons were developed. So overall, I would say about the damage model, it is certainly improved, and I would say for the most part pretty good now, but there are still a few things that need to be looked at. But that's what the beta is for, of course. Well, that's it for this video. As always, I hope it was entertaining, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.